Welcome to the Explainer. You know, you hear the term AI skills thrown around constantly, but what does that actually mean for most of us in our day jobs? Well, today we're going to unpack that by looking at the new AWS AI Practitioner certification. It really gives us a sneak peek at the new standard for AI literacy in the professional world. So, let's just dive right in.
First things first, why should you even care? Well, how about this number? A recent AWS study found that employers are willing to pay up to a 43% salary premium for people who have legit AI skills. I mean, that is a massive number. And we're not just talking about tech roles. This is across marketing, finance, IT, you name it.
And that right there is the big question, isn't it? What are these skills that are worth so much? Because it's not just for the PhDs building these AI models from scratch anymore. A whole new kind of professional is emerging. And by digging into what it takes to be an AI practitioner, we can pretty much lay out a map of exactly what you need to know.
Okay, so let's get real. Who is this actually for? Let's figure out if you're maybe already acting like an AI practitioner, or if it's the role you should be shooting for next.
You know, this comparison really draws a line in the sand. If you're a general cloud practitioner, you need to know a little bit about a lot of things. In fact, AI is just one little task on that exam. But the AI practitioner role, whoa, that's a different story. It is laser-focused. It's all about AI, machine learning, and generative AI. It's about depth in this one super important area.
So who are these people? Well, the official guide points to roles like business analysts, folks in marketing, project managers. See a pattern here? These aren't the deep learning engineers in the weeds coding. They're the people who have to use the AI, who have to manage AI projects and make smart decisions about it. Think about the marketer who's trying to run a generative AI campaign, or the IT manager who needs to understand why their team's fancy new model isn't working right. That's the AI practitioner.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are the foundational things an AI practitioner absolutely has to know? We're going to use a couple of questions, kind of like from a practice exam, to see what's considered truly essential. So here's a classic scenario. Your team builds a model, and it looks fantastic in testing. A+ scores all around. But the second you roll it out into the real world, with new data it's never seen before, it just completely bombs. What on earth went wrong? This is a core concept everyone in this space has to understand. The problem has a name. It's called overfitting. The model has basically just memorized the test questions instead of actually learning the subject. The solution? It's something called regularization, which is just a fancy way of saying you simplify the model so it can think more generally. Now, a manager doesn't need to code this fix, but they absolutely need to know what their team is talking about when they say, we've got an overfitting problem, we need to regularize it. Okay, here's another fundamental idea. Let's say your company has a huge folder of images, and every single one has a label on it: cat, dog, bird. You want to build a model that can classify new animal pictures. What kind of machine learning are you going to use? The answer is supervised learning. And it makes sense, right? It's supervised because you're giving the model an answer key, the labeled data, to learn from. This is by far the most common type of machine learning in the business world, and being able to spot a supervised learning problem is a day one must-have skill. And now for the topic that has completely turned everything upside down: generative AI. Knowing how to talk to these models, how to prompt them effectively, it's not some niche skill anymore. It's quickly becoming a core competency for, well, almost everyone. So, how do you actually get what you want out of an AI? Well, it turns out a great prompt is like a recipe with 4 key ingredients. First, you give it clear instructions, like summarize this. Then you add some context. Summarize this for an audience of executives. Then you add the input data, the actual thing you want summarized. And finally, you tell it the output indicator in 5 bullet points. When you think this way, prompting stops being a guessing game and becomes a real skill.
But what about when things go sideways? You ask for a picture of a nice red apple, and it keeps putting oranges in the picture. You're telling it what you want, but it just doesn't seem to be listening. How do you get more control?
This is where negative prompts come into play. And honestly, they're a total game changer. It's such a simple but powerful idea. You don't just tell the AI what to do, you also tell it what not to do. So now your prompt becomes a red apple with a negative prompt that says no oranges, no text, no watermarks. This is a critical tool for anyone who needs to get really specific, usable results from these models.
Of course, with all this power comes a whole lot of responsibility. A huge, and I mean huge, part of being an AI practitioner is understanding the ethical guardrails. This isn't just some afterthought, it's a core part of the job.
Let's look at this really difficult but really important scenario from the practice questions. You have an AI security system, and it's clearly showing bias. It's flagging people from one ethnic group way more than others. What's the most likely reason for that? This isn't some textbook problem. This is a real-world challenge that companies are grappling with right now. In a case like this, the most likely culprit is sampling bias. It means that the data the model was trained on was flawed right from the start. It didn't have a fair representation of everybody. So the model learned that unfairness and then started amplifying it. For any AI practitioner, this means you always have to be asking that critical question: does our data actually reflect the world we're using this AI in?
Now, it's also vital to be able to tell the difference between two common ways an AI can fail. First, you have a hallucination. That's when the AI is just factually wrong. It just confidently makes stuff up. Then you have toxicity. That's when the AI produces something harmful or hateful. One is about being incorrect, the other is about being offensive. They are not the same, and knowing the difference is crucial for building safe systems.
Here's another one of those high-stakes situations. A bank is using an AI to approve or deny loans. When the regulators show up for an audit, the bank has to be able to explain why the AI made the decisions it did. So, what's the single most critical factor that decides whether they can do that?
The answer is model complexity. This is one of the fundamental trade-offs in AI. Often, the most powerful and accurate models are black boxes. It's almost impossible to see how they're making their decisions. Simpler models, on the other hand, are way more transparent. So for a bank or anyone in a regulated industry, choosing a slightly less powerful but more explainable model is often the much smarter business decision. So we have covered a ton of ground here. Let's pull it all together and boil it down to a final readiness checklist. What are the key pillars of knowledge for any modern AI practitioner?
It really comes down to these 5 core domains. You need the basics of both old school and new school generative AI. You need to know how to apply them to real business problems. You have to have a solid grasp on the rules of responsible AI. And finally, you need to understand the security and governance you need to wrap around all of it to keep things safe. This right here, this is the blueprint. Look, at the end of the day, this isn't about turning everyone into a coder. It's about developing a new kind of literacy. It's the ability to speak the language of AI, to direct it with strategy, and most importantly, to use it responsibly. The blueprint for what the modern world needs is becoming clearer every single day. So the only real question left is, are you ready to start building?